In progress.
Hello everyone, welcome to the first EIP Editors Workshop. I'm Pooja Ranjan. I work with the Ethereum cat herders and have been engaged with the EIP process since 2019. It's with great excitement that I welcome you all today for this session, and I hope some of you, after watching this session and learning more about the process, may stick around and support us with the EIP process in order to merge pull requests faster and keep our EIP files up to date. For people who are learning about this editors workshop just now, just some background around it. It all began with a conversation on Twitter, like we were discussing about EIP process, and it was inspiring to notice that a simple discussion can initiate a lot of community contribution. People reached out and we tried to answer some questions on different forums. Long story short, we wanted to have these people uh, get involved with the process as soon as possible. And instead of answering questions in DM, we thought of having this workshop today where we can share this thing publicly, and people who may not have been part of that individual group be able to learn about the process and be able to participate in the process. But before we get into the agenda, I would like to share link of an interest form that we have created here. This is just to create your basic details. I hope I'm sharing the right form here. Am I? Yes. Okay, so this will help us to collect your details and will also help us to understand like what is your specialization, where we can tag you. We'll talk all about the process in a few minutes. So yeah, please take a look, and whenever you get a chance, please fill it out. With that out of the way, on agenda, we have a high-level overview. I have a short presentation, 5 to 10 minutes at the max, where we can just go over a little bit of EIP lifecycle and what has changed since everything started. We'll talk about individuals' role and responsibility. We are talking about the EIP editors, associates, reviewers, and authors. So who they are, what role they perform in this EIP process. We'll try to provide an overview of that. And then Sam Wilson will provide us a hands-on demonstration on how we actually review these proposals, these pull requests that get into different GitHub repositories. Sam always does that with the EIP editing office hours, but in this meeting, he would be doing it for people who have joined here live and maybe answering any questions. So at any point, if you have any question, please feel free to drop in the chat and we'll try to have them answered, as well as we will have a dedicated Q&A session right after the demonstration. So, okay, one more thing. Because I have you all here, before we start the presentation, I want to have a couple of questions answered in the chat if you can. Does anyone here know what is the total number of present Ethereum standards available? I mean, it should include all EIP, ERC repository that we have. So you can give us any number that you think is the current number of total Ethereum standards that we have in repository. Please answer them in the chat. And I have another question for you as well. It's about like, if we combined all these three repositories, how many different categories of standards, standards track do we have? So if anyone has any guess, estimation, please do write it on the chat and we'll get to that in a minute. So with that, I think I can perhaps go ahead and start sharing my screen to talk about today's presentation. Sure. All right. I know we are here, so we are definitely aware of what EIP process looks like, but we will just quickly go over the process and look into the changes that people should be mindful of. Needless to say, what is EIP? It is definitely a very important design document and the process document and any other information related document that we try to maintain it for the Ethereum ecosystem. We maintain it as a standard so we can have people get participated conveniently. They do not have to discover the wheel again. They just follow the standard which is already there and start working from there. Most of these information are captured in EIP1. People can always review it. So this is our present repository. On a high level, we have three different types on EIPs, which is meta, standard, and informational, and same on the ERC as well. The basic difference that we see here is, since the GitHub repositories have been splitted, we have now ERC available on the ERC GitHub repository, and the three other categories which are available on a standards track, like core, networking, and interface, are on the EIP side. However, there are certain interface proposal which are related to wallet and something like that, then they are also available on the ERC GitHub repositories. Most of us here are also aware of roll-up improvement proposals. So roll-up improvement proposal is the latest addition to the Ethereum standards. And we have a separate GitHub repository for that. And they also have a separate meta proposal for the documentation of the purpose and the guideline that is called RIP 7810, where people can follow how RIPs are being maintained. Here we see that we do not have informational type as of now, and most of the proposals are divided into standard tracks and meta. Meta is definitely RIP 7810, and standard tracks are further divided into core, RRC, and others. We do know that at this point we have three different GitHub. So overall, the structure looks something like this. Now you can imagine the role of editors who are trying to support these incoming pull requests to merge it. There's a lot because we have so many different types, so many different categories. The question I asked before beginning this presentation is like, if anyone is aware of total number of categories that we have on standard track. So total number of standard track categories, we have 6 if we take a look closely, because the core is available on EIP side as well as on the RIP side. The same with interface. Interface is also available on the EIP GitHub as well as on the ERC GitHub. So if we look into it, something like this will be there in our mind. We are perhaps familiar with this standardization process, which is more or less similar in all types and categories. However, there are small differences which I'm going to mention right now. This 14 days from last call to final is applicable to almost all category except for core and RIP. I will talk about it why it is different, but more or less all EIPs goes through these processes, and these are the different statuses that we follow here. EIP 7723, which is like network upgrade inclusion stage proposal, it talks about how core EIP should be maintained. So for core EIPs, we maintain the status definitely on the preamble of the EIP, but we also try to maintain a separate list on the upgrade EAPs. There are different stages: proposed for inclusion, considered for inclusion, scheduled for inclusion, and included. And some of the proposals which are filtered out, they are declined for inclusion, but this is with respect to one particular upgrade. This decline for inclusion EIPs can also be considered for the next upgrade we have. So even if it is not part of the present upgrade, it is not lost. If it is relevant, that they can be considered. For example, the EOF proposals, the worker tree proposals that we are discussing could be there. Now here, as per my understanding, we do discuss the proposal for inclusion and consider it for inclusion when we put it on DevNet. When we move it to the public testnet, they would be scheduled for inclusion. And from public testnet to mainnet deployment, there are not only 14 days. It can vary. It can depend upon how many testnets we have in line and how we are performing on the testnet. That's the reason why we do not have that 14 days timeline here from last call to final. That's about core. What happens in RIPs? In RIPs, we do not have the last call status at all. According to EIP's RIP 7810, we do have review and then it finally goes into final. If you notice, there are certain differences on the process flow as well. Here from idea to draft, if it is gone to withdrawn, it's gone. Similarly, review to stagnant. If it is gone to stagnant, it will be withdrawn. As of now, I don't see it's going back. I may have to look into details like why it is planned like that, but this is what it is documented in RIP 7810. In case you are planning to be an RIP editor, or if you specialize in that domain, may you want to have this discussed, and yeah, we will get to know more about it. Moving ahead, the core thing of this presentation here is like who we are, what are the participants here, and what are the expected roles and responsibilities. Broadly speaking, we have divided the participants, the key participants, as authors, reviewers, editors, and associate editors, what they are doing in the process. The name itself defines authors are people who actually document these proposals. They are mostly responsible for collaborating with the community. As Sam Wilson always say, that EIP process is author-driven process. So if you are around, you are going to see your proposal into the final status. So please be around, don't go away. For reviewers, this is a new category that we have proposed and we are planning to add it. You may find a document in the resources section on the agenda today. There we have added this document which explains who are reviewers and what major roles and responsibilities would be there. But on a high level, they are basically technical reviewers. They are SME, subject matter experts, that can help editors to merge these proposals sooner rather than later. Editors are mostly responsible for editorial edits, but reviewers can complement them by adding their technical review. Editors also perform certain other responsibilities, and editor associates are people who are trying to help them do these jobs. So I have tried to put together it into different base points, like how we can differentiate between an editor and between a reviewer. As of now, editors are the one who are responsible for adding numbers, EIP numbers, and looking into editorial aspects of it. They just want to make sure that it is compliant to the EIP template and everything is well formatted. But we would want to have standards that make sense. It's not that we do not have standards that make sense, but it's just that we can have we can value add if we have those standards reviewed by subject matter experts. So these are the focus area based on which we would like to have more reviewers added to the process. We want to have like these people technically skilled and help us like refine the process even further. While we are talking about process, one of the key responsibility of EIP editors is to maybe solve some corner cases, which are generally there in form of pull requests. Say, for example, someone sent a pull request, which people are not sure if they can merge or not. There are divided opinion. Then we go for call for input, and editor will open the call for input, and it will be open for 1 month where we try to collect feedbacks from editors only. However, when we have reviewers, then we can perhaps start collecting inputs from reviewers as well to like ensure the feasibility of the proposal, ensure the quality of the proposal. But where would you get this information? Most of these informations are documented in a EIP called EIP Editor Handbook. This is a living proposal. We keep it updating. So as I mentioned that right now, this is the job of editor, but when we get reviewers, we can perhaps make out a way in which we can collect information from reviewers. We can perhaps edit our tools to, collect or tag those reviewers so they can review these particular pull requests that or this kind of thing. So that's all about the presentation. And from here on, let's take a look at the pull request, which is already available on our GitHub repository. Sam will be sharing his screen and may be able to walk us through one of the proposals. You're on mute, Sam.
Sorry about that. All right. So yeah, I can definitely walk us through editing a proposal, and I'll, unlike from the office hours that I normally do, I'll be doing this from the editor perspective. So yeah, and this is pretty informal. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute and yell at me. I'm happy to answer anything that anybody's curious about. I'll also be pulling up some resources that I use during my editing. And yeah, so we'll go from there. So I guess the first thing that we should talk about is probably EIP1. So let's pull that up here. So this is where everything is defined. All of the like hard rules of the EIP editing process are defined here. So if you haven't read this yet, you should. There's brief descriptions of each section and the order that they have to come in. Same with the header fields. Most of this is enforced by our bot, which kind of segues into the next thing that I want to talk about, which is our bot, which is EIPW. If any of you are developers, this tool can always use more work. It's written in Rust. Just make a pull request with anything you want to fix, and I'll be happy to take a look at it. But yeah, so this tool enforces a series of rules. Each rule has a quick description in the README. These have kind of been gathered over the years as people make mistakes writing EIPs. Yeah, so if you ever want to know what kind of lints we have here, there's a description here. And then we also have more in-depth documentation about the rationale behind each lint. And that's in the docs folder of EIPW. And it's also linked in any of the error messages that EIPW generates. So if you ever want to know the background as to why something is like a rule is the way it is, this is the place to look. So with that kind of out of the way, I want to jump into actually editing an EIP. So how do I find what EIP to edit? So we have a tool here on the EIP's Insights page called EIP Board, and it orders all of the pull requests for EIPs and ERCs according to who's been waiting the longest for an editor response. So yeah, we can just start taking a look at that. I guess let's start with maybe an EIP. So let's pop open a few of these and let's take a look at them. So this is a dependency update, so we're going to skip that. This is probably spam. Let's see, is this spam? No, but I'm also not going to do with that now. And not with that either. Let's jump down here. All right, here's one. This is a typo fix. These are a very common type of EIP. Let's take a look at the changes. So adding a description. Okay, yeah, so this is a pretty good example. Let me make my screen a little bit bigger here. So this is an update to an already existing EIP. You'll note that it's final, so we have to be particularly careful when examining these type of proposals. So in this particular pull request, the pull requester is both updating the pull request or the EIP to the new format. You can see adding a description here, and is probably trying to fix other things that are wrong as well. So generally speaking, for final proposals, we don't want to mix too many things into one pull request because we need to keep it kind of consistent over time, and the smaller the change, the better. So let's take a look at what this person has changed. They've added a description, that's fine. What have they changed about the, okay, so they've changed the usernames. So that's something to be concerned about. Let's, let's go take a look at the format for that because I never remember. It is username, then email address. So actually, you know what? This is a final proposal, so we're not going to do that. We're just going to say, don't change the author line. So okay. Yes, it does create a description. So that's fine. I think the description is a reasonable description for the title here. Updating an EIP to like the new format, because back in the day they used to have like simple summary and stuff. Updating it is fine, as long as it's like small, understandable changes that we can verify. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so this person just added a new line here for some reason. Yeah, so I'm going to say this is pretty simple to do. We're just going to request changes and say, too many changes here for a final proposal. Okay, so we're just going to say, come back later with a smaller pull request. Yeah, and you can do that a lot for final proposals because, yeah, people tend to do that a lot. So let's pick another random one here. Okay, that's going stagnant. And how about this one? Also going stagnant. Let's look at some ERCs instead. All right, here we go. So this is a new ERC being added. So this is a pretty good candidate for a review today. So this has previously had a review. So just going to check to see what everybody else has commented. All right, okay. All right, let's give this a review. So as an editor, you don't want to focus too much on the technical aspects of the EIP. You want to focus more on following the guidelines, understandability, readability. Some questions in the chat here. So if you're editing multiple EIPs in the same PR, like try to keep the edits tiny. The more like each EIP you add to the PR will ping the authors of that EIP. So it's kind of impolite to ping everybody if you edit a bunch of EIPs. Try to keep it to one per PR, but if you have to, you can. And like there are some cases where you do have to, like there are circular dependencies, you have to update them both in the same PR. Yeah. Anyways, let's look at this. So privileged non-fungible tokens tied to RWA. Okay, so RWA here is probably a less common abbreviation. So let's get them to put that in the description as well, so that people know kind of what RWA stands for. For discussions too. So all of this is correct. We know it's being merged as a draft. Standards track ERC is pretty common. So let's go into the abstract here. So the abstract isn't an introduction. That's a pretty common thing that people make mistakes when they're writing their documents. The abstract shouldn't just introduce the proposal. It should also give a summary of how the proposal works. You don't want, like, after reading the abstract, you want your readers to kind of have an understanding of what's going to be going on. So this EIP defines an interface to carry a real-world asset with some privileges that can be exercised by a holder of corresponding NFT. Serves the interface for non-fungible tokens. Wait, is that just the same thing twice? It defines an interface to carry a real-world asset with some privileges that can be exercised by the holder of interface for non-fungible tokens representing real-world assets. I mean, that's okay. The privileges we describe here specifically refer to the rights and interests bound to RWA NFT that can be executed by the holder in the real world. Yeah, okay, that's reasonable. And then the first time, yes, that's good. The first time an abbreviation is used in the body, you also want to make sure that it's shown like that, because a lot of these terms are unique, especially there's some AI related ones and a lot of financial related ones that developers won't really understand. So making sure that you define what the abbreviations are is really important for readability. Okay, NFTs bound to real world assets sometimes need to carry certain privileges that can be exercised by the holder. Sure. Users can initiate transactions on-chain to specify the exercise of a certain privilege, thereby achieving real-world privileges that directly map the on-chain privilege through subsequent operations. For example, if a certain product choose the... Okay, yeah, so that seems reasonable. However, yeah, so this is a decent motivation for this proposal. So one thing you have to be really careful about with motivation and the section rationale later. The motivation section is supposed to justify why the proposal as a whole needs to exist. So like, why do we need non-fungible tokens that can be tied to real world assets? That's the kind of question the motivation should be answering. Whereas the rationale, which comes later, down here somewhere, there it is. Rationale is supposed to answer questions about the contents of the document. So like, for example, why they chose ERC 721 as the base of this proposal as opposed to ERC 1155. So motivation is kind of the big picture. Why do we need the whole proposal? And rationale is to answer specific questions about this proposal. So let's go through the specification section here. So we normally have this little blurb at the top. It is optional, but we recommend it. And if you use any of these all caps terms, so must not required, etc., then you need this blurb. And if you don't use them, you don't need the blurb. Okay, so the standard inherits the ERC 721 NFT token standard for all approval functions are inherited from this token standard without changes. Additionally, the standard also inherits the ERC 721 metadata standards for names. So yeah, okay. And a compliant contract following the CIP must implement the following interface. Perfect. So now let's take a look through this. I don't generally review interfaces that well. I'm not a Solidity developer, but I do give them a quick look just to see if there's anything obvious. some stuff to pay attention for here are naming conventions. Make sure that like people follow a consistent style, and that there's no what's a good way? Implementation details in here. So a lot of people will end up writing a contract as opposed to an interface. That's a problem because we aren't specifying how something is implemented, and we're only specifying the externally visible behavior. So in this case, this is fine because this is an interface, so it can't define any internal behavior. But that's something to be aware of. People will try to put actual code in here and claim that that's the only way to implement a standard. Don't let them do that. Okay, so we have an event here. Does it describe when it's emitted? So this event is emitted when a specific privilege of a token is successfully exercised. That's reasonable. Exercise a specific privilege of a token. Okay. Defines a few things. Perfect. Okay. Okay. And then get privilege IDs. Okay. If there's a privilege, the function. Okay, and then it has a metadata. Perfect. And then it has some schema here. Great. So we should probably say what format this is in. Okay. So I'll quickly look through this. Yep, that looks fine. Yeah, so that's great. Okay, so let's look through the rationale here. So with the privileged exercise event emitted on Tane, we can determine that the user has emitted or has confirmed the exercise of this privilege so as to implement the privilege in the real world. Okay, that's perfect. We choose to include not just 2 for functions exercise privilege, so that a specific privilege of an NFT may be, okay. So here we have them creating a requirement here with the all caps may. If you remember, we define those up here at the top. You want to make sure that people don't put requirements anywhere other than the specification section. If you were to delete the rest of the document except for specification, you should still be able to implement the standard. That's kind of like an important concept. You don't want people introducing requirements in their abstract or in their motivation. You want to make sure that the specification section is self-contained. So let's maybe exercise for someone who will benefit from it other than the NFT holder nor the transaction initiator, and this EIP doesn't assume. Also, like fix grammar when you can. This EIP doesn't assume. Where'd it go here? Who's the part to perform this action, and it's totally decided by the developers who are using the standard. Okay. We choose to include an extra data field to function exercise privilege for extra message for future extension. Yep. For example, developers can use data to exercise a privilege that takes effect directly on chain, such as the direct distribution of cryptocurrency assets. So that's perfect. The Boolean view functions of is exercisable and is exercised can be used to check whether a specific privilege of an NFT can be exercisable or has been exercised to the to address. Okay, so I think that's kind of implying something that we should probably ask them about. We want to talk about whether or not it's valid to exercise it more than once. So this is kind of an ambiguity, and that's something we have to watch out for as editors. So okay, and we have some messages in chat here. Let's see. Yeah, so how do you check for uniqueness? You don't. There's no requirement that a proposal be unique. You can have two proposals implementing exactly the same thing. That's fine. There's a couple reasons why you might want to do that. So you might have different ideas on how the proposal is supposed to work. So you'll have diverging implementations. That's totally fine. You might also have one go stagnant and the proposal be taken over by new authors, in which case it's exactly the same contents. That's also totally fine. Us as editors, our role is not to decide what the technical direction of Ethereum is. So we don't prevent proposals that are somewhat ridiculous or that'll never happen, or proposals that are duplicates. We just let people write whatever they want, and as long as it's reasonably well understandable, then they can have an EIP number. What was the next one here? How do you choose proper reviewers? We don't. So right now, EIP editors are kind of like we try to keep the number fairly low because EIP editors also have input on the EIP process. So we want to make sure that when we add a new EIP editor, they are aligned with our kind of philosophy and our goals. And EIP reviewers, we don't really have a process for it, and that's something that Pooch has been working on building lately. So hopefully you'll see people coming on with some technical experience, which is going to be great. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. I have a general question. I can imagine that if you're both a reviewer and an editor, these roles get somewhat mixed up. As an editor, you have to provide feedback on the format, but as a reviewer, you have to explicitly review the content. I can imagine that if I were in those two roles, I'd rather submit two reviews, one for content and the other for format. That is a great question. And yes, so we only use formatting reviews on the pull requests. And if you're talking about content, you make your review on the discussion thread. So if you're not familiar with the EIP editing process, there's a forum thread on Ethereum Magicians that's created, or the author creates rather, for each proposal. Any discussion of the technical merits or content has to go on that thread. And that's just to keep things organized. So yeah, if I happen to make a technical review of a proposal, I'll do my editorial review on GitHub, and then I'll make technical comments on the other thread. Okay. Yeah, okay, great. So I think at what point does an EIP number get assigned and who assigns it? Okay, so that's kind of a touchy subject, I guess. It's caused a lot of problems in the past. So the rules as written answer is that EIP editors assign a number whenever they want, whenever they feel like it, according to whatever rules they want. The actual answer, which is kind of like a convention or a precedence thing, is AB Kotep. I don't know how to pronounce his username, unfortunately. Will show up and assign an EIP number based on a spreadsheet we have. But that might change in the future, and hopefully we'll get a bot to do it. But it's been a long time coming, so don't hold your breath for it. Yes, EIP number farming has been a huge problem in the past, so we try to avoid that. Yeah, okay, so I think I'm caught up on questions, so back to the EIP. So we were down here in the rationale section. Yeah, okay, cool. So Boolean view function, great. So let's go into the backwards compatibility section. So backwards compatibility is about it's very relevant for EIPs because this is where you would document like what would break on chain. So for example, if you remove the self-destruct opcode, you'd have to have a big section about backwards compatibility and how that would affect existing contracts. For ERCs, it's also useful, but generally speaking, people won't fill it out as much. This is where you talk about things like your proposal has like a 90% overlap with ERC20, but it's different in some small areas. So you could talk about how it would mostly work in wallets here and how, like what parts wouldn't. Yeah, so in this proposal specifically, it's an extension of ERC 721. It's fully compatible with both the optional extensions. Great, so that's perfect. So then we have a reference implementation section. This is optional. Proposals don't need to include one. If they do, it's great. Something to be concerned about here is the license. And we can talk more generally about licenses while we're here. EIPs themselves are always licensed as CC0. Code within the EIP must also be CC0. So if you see a code snippet that has like an SPDX license identifier of MIT and it's inline, you have to recommend that they move it to the assets directory, which is exactly what they've done here. So let's go and take a look at their assets. So this is 7765. So here we go. So you can see here that they have an MIT licensed snippet, which is fine. Then they have their metadata, which is also fine. And here's their reference implementation. So sometimes you'll note that people include a ton of OpenZeppelin. Sometimes they'll even include OpenZeppelin files. They might include their package.json or the package.lock. We don't want that cluttering up our repository, so just tell them to delete it. In this case, it's fine. People can go and find ERC 721 if they need to. The important stuff is what's in this file. I won't even take a look at this because I'm not a Solidity developer and I can't provide a useful audit here. So we'll just go back to the proposal. Okay, security considerations. So this is where you should put content that might affect users, might affect the health of the network, privacy considerations, anything in here that falls under the very wide kind of family of anything to do with security. So compliant contracts should pay attention to the storage states of the privileges. The contract should properly handle the state transition of each privilege of each NFT, clearly showing that each privilege is exercisable or has been exercised. So this is kind of not really useful security considerations. I'm not gonna comment on it here because it's not technically wrong, but it's not useful. You should probably encourage people to don't give general feedback. Like a lot of people will try to say things like, you know, your code should be audited. It's like, no, duh, your code should be audited. Like if you're writing anything for blockchain, you should make sure that somebody pays attention to it. You should try to have specific actionable guidelines in here. And this is just like, yes, every contract should pay attention to make sure that storage is handled correctly. That's not super useful. Okay, so compliant contracts should also carefully define access control, particularly whether any EOA or contract may or may not call exercise privilege function in any use case. Yeah, here, look, it's the security audits and tests should be used to verify that access control. Yeah, so that'll just show up a lot. I'm not too picky about it, but if you want to be like the best editor you can, you should probably tell people to not do that. And then copyright has to just exactly be this. If they add anything else, don't include this, you have to flag it as request changes so that they go and fix it. So let's take a look back through these. So because the EIP review process can be very slow sometimes, I sometimes let people slide in like broken proposals or things that need to be fixed into draft. And then when they try to move into review, they get another full review there. And that's just to give people like the freedom to commit their own changes. So this one here, like this is very minor. That's minor. That's minor. Yeah, okay. So everything here is pretty small. So I'm going to approve this with a note that they fix these things while they're in draft. So elements. Okay, cool. So that's how a review works. Does anybody have any questions?
There's one more on the chat you might want to answer.
Sure. So regarding editor technical reviews, I sometimes leave technical reviews on new EIPs who are core EIPs and thus not merged. I actually left a review yesterday on block level warning. I just understood that the idea is to leave those discussions on ETH Magicians. This EIP did not have a thread yet. I'm not sure what the review process is going to look like, but I think it would make sense to have both the editorial format feedback and also technical feedback. Can discuss this asynchronously. Also, the GitHub review directly points to the file, so it's clear from content. Yeah, that is a problem. I wish there was a way that we could have like persistent comments that would last between pull requests, but the problem is that like you're going to end up having like 20 or 30 pull requests over the course of a very active EIP, and you will lose comments as the pull requests are closed. So I would very strongly suggest that all technical review be done on the forum thread, just because then it's in one place and you don't have to go digging through like 30 different pull requests. Cool. So that's it for my review. I don't know if we want to do a second one or
Yeah.
actually, there's one more thing I wanted to bring up here before we move on. So I have an unofficial list of rules for EIPs. So this is just kind of like my personal guidelines. These are not official. These are just what I use when I'm going through a proposal. I believe they're linked in the related resources, but this is just like stuff to pay attention to, like heading should be in title case, use SVGs over JPEGs, don't link to specific services. So like you wouldn't talk about like Uniswap, you talk about like fake swap or something like that, just to prevent giving special treatment to certain companies or services. Yes, this is all listed here. Use it or don't when you're reviewing. It's up to you. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Sam. So anyone, if you guys have any question, please feel free to add it in the chat. We'll try to respond as we get it. I think we have a couple of announcements in the meantime. Perhaps we can go ahead and do that. I don't see Gajendra Singh on the call, but I wanted to make this announcement that as of now, we are doing editing office hour twice a month, like every alternate Tuesday. Sam Wilson is taking out time to help out new authors or someone who may have done it in the past, but because of the new processes may not be aware of it, to answer all these questions and the kind of review that he is doing right now in order to answer all the questions to the author directly. These have been very much helpful for new authors and ERC especially, because ERC we get a lot of pull requests in. But recently we have started receiving requests from EIP as well, as Joachim mentioned one of those, like why it is there is no FVM thread created. So we want to have this thing addressed on EIP side as well. And for that, Gajendra Singh, who is one of our EIP editors, have agreed to conduct an office hours especially for EIP reviewing. And we would be starting that editing office hour from January 28th. So the first meeting on that side would be on January 28th at 1600 UTC. The time would be same, the day would be same, except we are adding one more office hour for authors and developers to help out with the EIP process. We are close to the 50th office hours. So kudos to Sam Wilson for running all these 49 so far. And we are going to have the 50th one on 21st of January. So if you would want to join the next editing office hour to learn more about the editing process, that is the place where you would like to go. And on the next announcement we have, it's about a testing that is required by EthCatHerders side. I see George Harvey on the call. He is looking for some support from developers, authors who may have, kind of contributed to Pectra upgrade. So George, if you would like to quickly take a moment to explain the process, and we can share the link with authors here.
Yeah, sure. So this is a simple claim process for EIP authors who contributed to the Petra upgrade. If you have a EIP that's included in that upgrade, you're eligible to claim. And we just want to test the whole claim flow of this, like claiming this NFT, very similar to POAP. And just want to test it before we actually launch. So we do have instructions. Pooja just shared it in the chat. It should take only 2 minutes, but I'd love to hear feedback and if you guys experience any kind of issues going through it.
Thank you, George. I know some of the client developers who are here in this meeting or maybe watching this video later on may have been an author for one of the proposals for Petra. So if you get a chance, please take a look and help us testing this thing. We want to celebrate this upgrade and give away one NFT to each of the author to just remember that they have contributed to Ethereum network upgrade. That's all about it. I don't see any further question in the chat. So let's go back with the quizzes that we started. So I received multiple answers in the chat. The first question that I asked was like, how many EIPs do we have? Definitely people added some inputs. One of them was very close to the correct answer. We do have above 9,000 pull requests, but we have stopped allocating number with the help of pull requests. We are not now going by with the sequential number allocating, as Sam mentioned. It is a primary job of EIP editor to allocate. However, we are getting help from associates as well to get this number allocated as soon as possible. There is no wait time to get this number. As soon as any editor reviews the proposal or associate takes a look at it, the number will be allocated. We are currently at 914 proposals, which are available in different statuses. Most of them are not in the final status. Very small percentage goes into a final status, but the number is still not less. We are very close to 1,000. Any other question that we might miss? Yeah, about the reviewers section. So as of now, we don't have a process to notify reviewers, but the moment a pull request enters into GitHub repository, we do have a process to notify editors, which are added in our YAML file. We may create something for reviewers as well if we have enough reviewers. So the form that I have shared in this agenda as well as in the chat, if you may please fill it up, we would try to have you picked up for those categories. Like we do have labels on GitHub by which we know which type or category this particular pull request belongs to. So we may be able to add you, ping you, so you may be able to come and add your technical reviews on that. In the process that Sam explained, it was very clear that editors are looking into a proposal on a very high level, just making sure that this is a good standard for Ethereum ecosystem. We would want to just increase the quality of these standards, and sometimes these pull requests do not get merged because we are waiting for someone to make sure that the changes, those are, especially in the specification sections, are correct, which editor may or may not be evaluated depending upon their expertise. So there, I feel like reviewers will be of great value, and we would be in a position to merge these pull requests sooner rather than later. We do have good success in decreasing the total number of open pull requests. These days, I'm just trying to pull up the chart if I can quickly to give a look at it, like how good we are doing on that part. But I think adding reviewers there might be helpful. Okay, I think I got the chart. Let me quickly share the screen right here so we have a look at it. Is my screen visible?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so if people can take a look here, like look at the volume that we receive as pull requests. This is too high, especially for like EIP side. It was too many pull requests that we are receiving. ERC, because this is a relatively new repository, so it's less here. And RIP has recently started, so even smaller number of incoming PRs, but still the number is not less. The number is in hundreds, so we would want to decrease this thing. And for that, I believe adding more reviewers to the process would be super, super helpful. All right. Yeah, we are close to an hour. Any other question? Yes, of course. Please fill up the form. I have already received a few interests there. Would be nice to have more. So we can actually formalize the process. We can actually update our bot to be able to ping reviewers for those pull requests, those we are getting in. Any final question that we can answer in next 2 minutes? Well, thank you all for being a part of today's workshop. I'm happy that we have received so many interest in becoming editors. Okay, cool. And reviewers, I think your engagement will definitely help us make our process even better. Just a quick recap before we wrap for today's. We have explored the EIP process and tried to understand the roles of editors and reviewers. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer async even on the issue, or you can always visit to EthCatHerders Discord where all editors are available. So the question will be answered quickly. We went over the hands-on activity. If you still have questions, we do have planned one more editing office hour next Tuesday. Please come and join us. As a next step, please fill out the form so we can get to your area of specialization and just stay connected. That would definitely help us. I would like to thank to everyone who is supporting this process. A special thanks to our existing editors, Sam Wilson, Gajendra Singh, Matt Gannett, and Victor, for all your ongoing contribution and dedication to this EIP process. I would also like to thank Tim Beko for his encouraging tweet that helped encourage more client developers to actively contribute to the EIP editing and reviewing. And it was very inspiring to hear yesterday's meeting when he was mentioning that it would be a good day to see that every client has their own dedicated EIP editor and reviewer. So we look forward to have this kind of day achieved in near future. And I think this is just the first workshop, and we hope to bring more if there are any asks for this, if people want to have this. Thank you to EthCatHerders team. Thank you to designer of this presentation and for the session. Yeah, thank you all for joining us here, and I look forward to seeing all for your amazing contribution to the Ethereum ecosystem. Have a great rest of the day. We would share the recording on YouTube shortly. Oh, I think it is already live streamed. So yes, you can follow that. Thank you everyone for joining us today.